Texas, at this point, is a mostly uninhabited wilderness. Very few people live here, but of those few settlers, they understand that there is potential on this Texan soil. While many would look over at Texas as a meme nation, its only purpose is to get annexed by America, they miss the greatness that this state can achieve. This start is challenging, as you start off in a war that you can easily lose, and your expansion opportunities after that are very limited due to being next to the USA and Mexico, and having so little population, you can't do much against either of them. But I didn't pick this nation because it was easy. I went in knowing it was hard, and with some creative strategies and some patience, I was able to turn this barely populated state into one of the greatest nations on Earth. First, I had to focus on the war for our independence. To ensure Sam Houston could secure our freedom, I had to make sure the military was strong. So, I moved to pass the National Guard law because that makes the militarist faction very happy and loyal to our state. And that gives us a bonus of 30% attack and defense for our armies because of its high clout in our nation, giving us results like this. Nice. The Mexicans underestimated us. Upon engaging our army, they quickly realized they underestimated the true power of the Texan army, and we drove them back. Upon winning the battle, we realized we captured their lead general, General Santa Anna, and through some encouragement, we managed to convince him that Texas was just better off ruled by Texans. And now with Texas free, I immediately thought about how to expand the state. Once it was available, I moved to pass colonial resettlement so I could use the free land remaining in Texas to my benefit. Also, while this was going on, I was improving relations with the US so I could join their customs union, since it not only gives me access to their market, but also their people, since it makes it more likely that people in America will move to Texas, growing my labor pool. Once I had the relations to join, I made sure to make Texas look like a great place to move so I could attract more American settlers. People were coming in and I wanted to make sure there was enough land for the new settlers. So I did a diplomatic plan to take the rest of Mexican-occupied Texas. Now the Americans were open to helping me, but their friendship came at a cost. My freedom. They demanded I become a protectorate and seeing no other option, I had to accept. The French, for some reason, decided to take my side in the play, which led to Mexico backing down and surrendering the land. Now, although I was a protectorate, I realized there was still a lot of opportunity for me since I didn't have to pay any money to the US and I'm free to do most diplomatic actions. So I did what any decent settler would do and got to building myself up.
Well, let me have a rule and a saw and a board and I'll cut it. I'll climb up a ladder with a hammer and a nail and I'll nail it. Well, we worked so hard to build a little house together. In the snow or the rain or the ice cold wind, whenever. No matter what the weather, we're together.
As Texas grew, so did its needs, so I looked west to grab New Mexico. By offering Nevada to the Americans in the diplomatic play, they were ready to support my claim, and it scared the Mexicans into surrendering New Mexico to me without a fight. After this victory, I decided I needed to prepare my navy for some overseas conquest by upgrading to ironclads. which propelled me to minor power status. As a minor power, I could expand into new regions, and my first target was the small Central American nations since they were very weak, but once they were conquered, they could be developed into something better. I started with Costa Rica since they only had one brigade, and they were going through a famine, so I was basically just saving them by conquering their land. Upon seeing my attempt to rescue them from themselves, the Costa Ricans threw themselves into my arms and joined Texas happily. Now, word spread about the heroic Texans coming to save Central America, and others joined too, like Nicaragua, and later on they were followed by Honduras and El Salvador. Now, I thought I accomplished a lot here, down in Central America, but then I looked back at America and was clearly shown up by President Ida Peabody. Now, a woman who, despite not having the right to vote in her own country, still managed to get elected as president, even though everyone hates her. Emboldened by President Peabody's bravery, I made a play for Panama, hoping later on some richer nation would buy it off of me. And the play worked out for me, since New Granada surrendered it without a fight. But despite our successes abroad, things were not going to be so easy around home. Without President Peabody to hold the nation together, the USA was descending into civil war. The Confederate States of America had risen up to defend the practice of slavery. And of all the states to leave, it only made sense that the main one to lead the charge and become the capital of slavery was Ohio. With most of the USA against us, we stood little chance to win against them. We were overwhelmed in battle after battle against them. We stood no chance against their greater numbers in the Confederacy, so the USA was forced to accept their independence. Things were looking pretty bad for us in Texas, but soon we received our golden ticket to greatness, with France offering payment to build the Panama Canal. Now, with the money I get from this, I decided it was time to set out for my own destiny and declare independence from America. See, the Americans were just too weak to stop me, so they just immediately capitulated and accepted my demands, and now I could focus on expansion once more. Knowing I was on a time crunch, I went to conquer more states from Mexico. When I started the diplomatic play, only the Canadians were willing to help, and that wasn't much. I was going into this war outnumbered, but I still believed strongly in the Texan spirit to overcome the Mexicans and their Spanish allies. When the war started, the Texan military had shown that they had outpaced the Mexicans and were able to push south into the Mexican heartlands. Every battle won by the Texans gave hope that one day that Texans would be able to reach the Pacific. And soon, that dream became a reality when, as we approached the Mexican capital, the Mexican government agreed to the peace terms and gave Texas some much needed land and resources to grow the market. While Texas had shown its power and expanded, the American people were suffering. By me declaring independence, the Midwest had no access to the American market, making it so they were suffering greatly due to lack of goods, if such goods were not able to be produced locally. Seeing this, there was really only one thing I could do, and seeing such suffering on a wide scale. Despite my noble intentions, the Americans fought very hard against my liberation. The Americans started to push me from Louisiana, but with some reinforcements, we pushed them back to New Orleans. There was a long siege for the city, but the Americans funneled in many troops to keep the front alive, but eventually the city would fall. Meanwhile, my army was making a push to secure the rest of Texas and destroyed the American forces in the northern part of the state. But that victory was short-lived as the American army gathered a huge force to counterattack and push for our capital. The Texan defenders in the battle were taken by surprise with the amount of men the Americans were able to throw in this battle and were defeated despite their superior equipment. Now, despite this, the Americans knew they couldn't keep this war going and negotiated a peace with us, surrendering the land we wanted. Things were looking good for Texas, but the game couldn't let that last for too long. So, a new flu variant just started in Prussia, so I figured it was only a matter of time till it reached me. Now, once it did happen, I tried to think, what would Texas think is the best response to something like this, and just came to the correct response here. I couldn't let some stupid cold hold back my country, so soon I went for a diplomatic play to puppet America. They were in such a sorry state that me puppeting and later annexing them would just be doing the American people a huge favor. And the American government seemed to agree with me, and they joined, leaving us with a very beautiful America to look at in 1902. I could only take looking at this for so long. So I started with cleaning up the Mexican enclave I left in Nevada. But the French wanted to stop me, so I figured I'd just revoke their lease on the Panama Canal. Once the war broke out, things immediately went bad for Mexico since they had a civil war. Figured this would make this war easy for me, but it was not so easy taking the Panama Canal. The first battle, we just bounced off their defense. So I had to get creative. What if I just walked behind the defenders? And it worked. The Panama was just taken without a shot fired. As the war progressed, Mexico's civil war ended, which for some reason reset all my occupation of the country, so I had to do it all over again. I was in a race against time to occupy as much of Mexico as possible before the more quality French troops arrived to reinforce. Now, I was lucky that my puppet America was keeping the bulk of the French army busy in West Africa, so they weren't going to send much. Now, Mexico eventually handed Nevada over to me, but the French stubbornly wanted to hold on to their Panama. But since they couldn't do anything, they eventually conceded the Panama Canal to me. With that war over, we started to get a lot better. I focused on integrating America, which happily accepted being part of Texas. And bonus, this gave us their colonies in Africa to use. Also, after 6 long years, I had finally defeated the Prussian flu, letting us focus on expanding more. I needed to work on uniting the rest of America, so I started with taking New York from the New America so I could later puppet them. With Texas being so strong, they had no choice but to accept it. Also, New Africa as well saw reason and accepted my demand for Florida too. Once the truce ran out, it was time for me to finish the job and puppet the new USA. 40 years ago, this country broke free and beat me in a war. Back then, they just seemed so powerful, but now, Texas had grown so much, they figured the best place for their country was as my subject so they could be part of a better economy. Now, unfortunately, not everyone in the New America puppet was happy with this change of leadership and rose up to try to escape Texas. These poor peasants didn't stand a chance because of the fine men of Texas and were quickly crushed. Once the Texas army reached their capital in Ohio, they knew they couldn't keep this fight going and surrendered. With my puppet stabilized, I could finish uniting and beautifying America under Texan rule. I could freely make a diplomatic play to annex my puppet, and they knew better to fight against me, so they accepted annexation, and now Texas could proudly stand from sea to shining sea. But I couldn't just let this game end without Texas being recognized as one of the greatest nations on Earth. So to prove myself to the world, I created a massive fleet that allowed me to be officially recognized as a great power. For those who've watched this far, I just want to say thank you. The response to my first video has been better than I imagined, and I'm just happy so many of you guys enjoyed it. Now, thank you, and make sure to like this video and subscribe to see more content in the future.